KTYT, I'm Nomi Konst here on Capitol Hill in Congressman Tim Ryan's office. Congressman Tim Ryan represents the 13th District in Ohio, ranging from Akron, Ohio to Youngstown. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Thank you so much for taking time.
Including Kent State University.
Including Kent State, the famous Kent State,
yes.
politically.
Yeah.
Wow.
How about that?
So speaking of politics, there's quite a bit of news today in the Democratic Party in terms of the dysfunction. The former chairwoman of the Democratic Party, Donna Brazile, she was an interim chairwoman. She has a book coming out, and she published some excerpts from her book in Politico. And it just, reignited a lot of the debate, the internal debate. Some of it's a little wonky, some of it's, complete insider baseball.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the party is going through a transition, and not just the institution of the Democratic Party, but also the leadership. And you, notably, the story that won't go away,
right.
You challenged former Speaker Pelosi, Leader Pelosi, for a leadership position. What was the intention? Why did you do that?
Well, I felt like we needed a change. I think every one of us who is progressive woke up the day after the election, if you slept at all that night, thinking, what the hell just happened? And I think Barack Obama kind of moving off stage exposed a lot of the internal problems that we have as a party, what our brand is, what our message is, what we stand for. And I woke up the next day ready, asking myself, like I think we all did, I must not have done enough. I worked my rear end off during the election. But my wife and I talked, and it was like, somebody's got to do something, and I think we need a change, and now's the time. And Trump won a lot of my areas in my district, did a lot better, won 2 of my 5 counties, which have been traditionally Democratic counties for the last, 20, 30 years. So I wanted to do more, and then I felt like we needed a change in Congress. New faces, new names, new brand, new message. And so I took the mantle and took the challenge. And I'm Irish too, and there's the old Irish saying, is this a private fight or can anyone get into it?
Oh,
yeah,
that's good. I like that.
So I'm all right with that.
How did the rest of your delegation respond? Because you got quite a few votes.
I thought we did really well. We got about a third of the votes, and there aren't as many blue dogs. Most of our caucus is progressive, so I got a lot more than anyone else ever had within the progressive group. So I was pretty proud of that, and I think there's a general sense that from a branding perspective, we have to start winning Ohio, Michigan. We have to be able to go compete in the South. We can't just write off the South. And I think there's a moral imperative there too. It's like, look, these are American citizens. They're human beings. They're living in poverty. Their wages haven't gone up. A lot of the economic issues, they don't have health care. They're losing their health care under the Republicans. Like, we need to go there. We need to show up and say, look, let me make the argument for you. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to vote for me, but I'm going to come and see you and tell you why I think the Democrats are best for you to vote for. And you look at West Virginia and Kentucky, those used to be Democratic strongholds. You look even some of the southern states used to be Democratic strongholds on those economic issues. And we've lost that, then we stopped going there. And so my pitch was, we need to play in every corner of the country and go and get those people to vote for us.
This seems to be the messaging debate that the Democrats are having. It's not so much old guard versus new guard, although that does exist, but it's whether or not the Democrats should put economics front and center and not lead with, forgive the saying, but this is the cliche, guns, gays, and vaginas. In some districts, right?
I've never heard it quite.
You've never heard it? Oh, it's very common.
Very good.
People respect you more clearly because I hear it a lot. But putting guns at the top of the ticket, not understanding that maybe some Democrats own guns. You're from Ohio. I'm sure that's very common in Ohio. Or when you talk about issues like reproductive rights, that there are some communities that would normally fall in line with Democrats, but because there's some candidates that have campaigned exclusively on that, they're losing a faction. But economics seems to be the intersection, the issue that intersects all divides, including Republicans. Why is this a fight? It just seems logical. It's the economy's stupid. It's what the Democrats have won on time and time again.
It's almost a false choice, too, to say, well, look, we have to be for issues of equality and justice and those things, or the economy. And in my estimation, so many of these issues are tied to the economy. I mean, if you want to talk about, decriminalization of marijuana, that in a lot of ways, yeah, it's a justice issue. It's also an economic issue. A young kid, makes a mistake, gets caught. You want them to never get a job the rest of their lives because they may have done something wrong when they were young. So that's an economic issue. You talk about reproductive rights and access to contraception. Those are economic issues too for women and their families. So all of these in one way or another, I think, tie in. But here's the thing. If you have a series of issues that people feel very strongly about, which I do, and if you look across the board, I agree with our position on all of those issues. The thing that unites all of us is the economic issue. Wages have been stagnant for 30 years. If you look at the last time we had tax reform, 31 years ago, since then, 96% of income growth has gone to the top 10%. So if you live in Youngstown or Akron or Gary, Indiana or Biloxi, Mississippi, you've not seen a pay raise. All of this wealth went to the top 1%. And so my hope is that if we're going to help any of these groups within the Democratic tent, which we want to do, we need a message that appeals to all of them, and maybe some that wouldn't agree with us on any of those, but would say, boy, Bernie Sanders or Tim Ryan or one of these people are talking about the economy, and I may disagree with them on some of these other issues, but they're going to increase my wages, they're going to secure my pension and make sure my family has health care. I'm voting for them. And like most relationships, anyone who's married knows you don't agree with people, even the ones you love the most. You don't agree with them on everything. So let's find that message that resonates with the majority of the American people and push it and get it implemented.
Now, you're not a political consultant, but I'm sure you've worked with a lot of political consultants and pollsters.
I try not to.
You try not to, but it's a function of the industry.
Yeah.
How much of this is simply about message or more? Meaning, if we're not going to Biloxi, if Democrats aren't going to Biloxi, Mississippi, because maybe a pollster said, well, our top line issues that progressives can't win in Biloxi, but we're polling on these other issues, the justice issues, but not polling on economics. So we're just not going to invest in Biloxi.
Yeah.
How much of it's just about message, and how much of it is about message plus investment?
Well, it's definitely both. But we should have a message you could take anywhere, and then we have to have the courage to recognize we got to go to some places that maybe they're going to push back on our message, and they're going to want to talk about something else, and their opinion of you is a stereotype or a caricature of us that Fox News presents, for example. Or Breitbart presents. All Democrats are for X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I read some of these articles, I'm like, what are they even talking about? Like, I have no idea. They'll put one little story that happened in one little town somewhere, and they make it a national story and try to, associate all Democrats with something that is controversial. And we've got to have the courage to go to that community and say, look, we may disagree on a few things. Let me tell you what we agree on. And then I've always agreed with what Howard Dean did. I thought the 50-state strategy was critically important for us, and it's one of the reasons we won the House back in 2006 was because Howard Dean had the vision to broaden the map and say we want to compete everywhere. So that's where the resources come in. And if I could just add one layer to that, it's that it's not a one-off. It's not like, oh, we went to Alabama and we tried to win and it didn't work out, so we're going to pack up and leave. Because that's, in the last few years, that's kind of been the strategy. Oh, we'll give it a shot and we'll put $5 million at the end of the race, and if we don't win, everybody leaves, they all go home, and we don't build on it. So the next step is sustained investment in these communities, building out the indivisible, building out the swing left, building out these groups and providing some seed money. It doesn't have to be a lot to keep those groups going, to continue to add, because they're the foot soldiers on the ground making the argument, knocking on a door, because people are going to be much more inclined to believe a neighbor who knocks on their door and tells them I'm a Democrat because my health care issue that my kid went through, and it was Obamacare that helped me be able to afford it and save the kid's life. That's a heck of a lot more persuasive than a Tim Ryan or somebody on CNN saying X, Y, or Z, why you should be a Democrat. That's so much more powerful. So our investments have to be over the long term to build that long-term engagement out.
Meaning less about the coastal strategy and the centralized, DC Beltway speaking to everybody else,
Yeah.
and California, New York dictating to the. It became a parody in a sense that the Democratic Party is exactly what Fox News
Yeah.
was representing,
Yeah.
just based on electoral math.
Right.
That's how it ended up.
And think about how that happened. I grew up just outside of Youngstown. My grandfather was a steel worker. My grandmother was in AFSCME, union people, union town, working class. And I look back and I think, how in God's name did the Democrats get pinned as the elite
Right.
coastal, party? I mean, it's mind-boggling to think of as to what happened. And I'm not quite sure everybody completely understands the depth of our problem in some of these regions. The lack of brand, the brand that we want. I think it's pretty deep, and we've got to really engage in a spirited debate as to why we believe what we believe, and not be afraid to tell people.
So you are a leader in Congress. You're frequently put on these lists of the future of the Democratic Party. There's not a large bench. You're on it.
Yeah. Well, you know how to flatter a guy. I tell you what.
He's on the bench. Hey, that's a
it's
sports
not a
metaphor.
very big bench.
That's a sports
Excellent.
metaphor.
See?
We had an
Coming
off-camera
along.
conversation about my lack of understanding of sports. So you're on the bench. How do we build that bench up, given that there are so many structural issues and not everybody's on the same page about messaging? And frankly, the leadership that's in place has been there for a very long time and may not be as aware, as you said, of the deeper problems happening in a lot of these localities. I grew up in Buffalo. I completely understand what you're saying.
I think, again, having a 50-state strategy, pulling talent from all corners of the country, and then competing in 70 or 80 congressional races. Even if, as I said, may not win it tomorrow, you may not win it in this cycle, but you're going to build it out. And I think even a little bit of money up front, $50,000, $100,000 to get a campaign manager, to get a social media team together, or just somebody to buy some ads and begin to have an organizing effort within that community is important. And candidate training and those kind of things that's how you build a bench. The whole country is a potential recruit for you. Even if maybe they weren't a Democrat, maybe bring them in. Maybe they align with you, but they never knew it. So casting a really wide net, competing everywhere, there's a certain power in saying, I believe in this message so much that I can take it to West Virginia.
Yep.
And I can win there. That's powerful. And I think that says, look, I'm willing to fight for what I believe in. And I believe it's good for you too. And let me tell you, coal miner in West Virginia, you're pretty aligned with the old steel worker in Youngstown.
Right.
And if we can have some leadership that says, look at what we can do together, that's a pretty powerful argument.